Hello, students. So let's review from where we left off last time about St. Kathrine Drexel life. Let's review what happened when she was met with Pope Leo XII and what he asked her to do instead of donating money to charities. He asked her if she would become a missionary. As a reminder, missionary is a person sent on a religious mission, especially one sent to promote Christianity in a foreign country. So after Kathrine Drexel joined the missionary and she became a nun, she joined um a nun and she founded the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament. The Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament is its own group of sisters and nuns that were dedicated to serve the African American and Native American communities. She dedicated herself to provide education to these communities. So these were one of the first groups of sisters that is solely focused on minorities instead of generalizing people. All her focus was to make sure that the African American and Native American communities had what they needed, that they had a safe space to pray, to learn. It was just for them to help because during this time period, fortunately, racism was an extremely high. Her first school that was open was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So here's a quote from St. Kathrine Drexel. Holiness consists in one thing, to do God's will as he wills it, because he wills it. So you're going to find an assignment on Google Classroom that's about this quote, and I want you to break it down as to what it means to you. But we're going to break it down here, and then I want you to go over to your Google Classroom and write it down. What does this quote mean to you, and how can it apply it to your life? So it says the first thing it says holiness consists in one thing, meaning what? That only thing that to be holiness is to do what? Is to do God's will. So if I do God's will, I know it's holy, right? Because he tells us that it's holy and because that's how he wants it, right? So if we need to follow God's will, meaning God's plan for us, then we will live a holy life, right? Just because it's God who's the one who's sending us this message to do what we need to do. So that's what St. Kathrine Drexel is telling us. She said, only because we are following God's will and because we know it's his will and we know what we need to do, therefore we're going to live a holy life. So I want you to see how this applies to you as a student. That if you know what God's will is, how do you know it's holy? Is it because God tells you? Because you feel holy? So I want you to think about that. Make sure you head on over to Google Classroom and also make sure you write down all these notes that we talked about in your religion notebook.